Bum bum bum, literature gets a look. Legs talk about books. And welcome back to Legs Talk About Books, the occasional podcast where, surprise, we talk about books. I'm your host, Hardleg Joe, if you didn't know, joined as always by my bearded compatriot, CB Radio.
How am I a bearded compatriot when we both have beards?
Well, I mean, you have beards too.
But I have multiple beards?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have over time. It's like that old joke, right? Where it's like, I used to do a lot of drugs. I still do, but I used to too. Good old Mitch Hedberg. Check out Mitch Hedberg sometime. Good at like one-liners.
We're plugging long-dead comedians.
Yes, you're welcome. I mean, we're not going to have a whole lot else here. I mean, Not to diminish our own show or anything, but you probably already noticed this is a shorter show than normal. We don't have quite as much to talk about this time as we do usually. In fact, we don't even have any notes written down or anything. We're just kind of like freeballing this time.
Yeah, no, we're just kind of rolling with this.
Yeah, which is not to say that this book isn't quality. It is. There's just not as much to talk about it.
It has substance, but the substance isn't something we're going to be like, well, you see what he was really doing here.
Yeah, but it is solid all the way through, and I guess we should say what we're talking about is The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson, the fourth and final novel from the year of Sanderson, from his Kickstarter campaign.
We have been unshackled by Sanderson.
Yeah.
We are no longer bound by his rule.
We're no longer bound by his rule. Although, honestly, after this, I'm kind of thinking maybe go back, read some more of Stormlight Archive.
Do not give in. Yeah, we're going to do that. I kind of really
probably. Maybe finish up Mistborn. I don't know. We'll really see. We'll have to see how this show takes us, where we're going from here.
I'm definitely in for Stormlight Archives. Mistborn, I'm still not 100% sold on.
Before we get too lost in the weeds, though, we should go ahead and just tell people, especially if you're new, every video is someone's first video, as they say. Our general thing is we're going to start by doing a spoiler-free review, just talking about what we thought about this book, what we liked, what we didn't like, without going into any story details. And then afterwards, we'll go ahead and we'll just do a little synopsis. Why not? Usually I don't like to do them, but we'll do a synopsis here. And then we'll talk about like the interesting themes, the interesting stuff that this book did that's worth discussing. So yeah. We'll go ahead and start with the spoiler-free thoughts. And I'd actually like to go first this time, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because it is worth saying right off the bat that unlike the other four Sanderson novels, where if you've never read anything by him, you can pretty much just step in and pick it up. Maybe there's some hints to his wider universes that you understand a little better if you know those books, but like you don't require them. This feels like you have to have at least read the first book in the Stormlight Archive to understand it, which fortunately we did. But, having not read the other three books in the Stormlight Archive, this kind of spoils a little bit of, like, what will happen there, which I personally don't care about.
Yeah, neither do I, but if you haven't read the books, then you're gonna be a little lost on there. He does some decent job of explaining some parts.
He does a good enough job of characterization that I think you can enjoy this even if you haven't read Stormlight, but you're going to get a lot more out of this if you know, like, the planet from that and the general characters. What's interesting, though, at least for us, because like I said, we know the fundamental stuff from reading Stormlight 1.
Yeah.
But we're not caught up to everything.
Even close.
From what I understand, and I could be wrong here because I didn't actually look it up. I try to avoid looking up, the Stormlight Wiki or whatever. I think it's called the Coppermind.
What's that like? I have the inability to stay away from wikis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just try to avoid it if it's something that I think I'm going to be reading in the future. But from what I understand, Stormlight Archive is planned to be 10 books. He's done 4 so far, and apparently he's going to finish the 5th one, and then there's going to be a time skip. And so this happens after that time skip, which is weird because, the 5th book hasn't come out yet. So some of this stuff is stuff that, like, we don't know because we haven't read books 2, 3, and 4. But some of this is stuff that no one knows because book 5 is not even out yet. So some of this is surprising even for people who are completely caught up. But I don't know where the line is for that because we're stuck at book 1.
Yeah, I thought that was actually, that this was something even farther ahead. Like, this was post-time skip, like after the second batch of 5 books.
Entirely possible. We also don't know.
Yep.
And there's another thing where this ties in very, very tangentially for Mistborn. I don't think this is like a spoiler or anything.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't involve the characters of Mistborn, it involves the planet they're on.
The society and planet.
Yeah, the society in this they mention as being spacefaring. And I know there's a time skip in Mistborn as well, that was like a series of 3 books, and then another series that takes place in like a steampunk era. Mm-hmm. And in this one, obviously, is way beyond the steampunk era. Yeah, they've got like faster than light travel and stuff.
Like we said, we read the first book, and when we left that off, it was kind of feudal.
Yeah, it was like a feudal era style
and
book.
We're talking spacefaring stuff. This didn't happen over a vampire weekend or something.
Yeah, you meet some like spacefaring people, and they're like, oh, it's from this universe or from this planet, and we're like, I don't know what that planet is. And then they start using magic based off metal. I'm like, oh, that's the Mistborn powers.
Oh crap. Oh no.
Oh, it's those guys. Well, I guess they made it out to space eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I because we haven't read the rest of those, I don't know if like, near the end they hint at space travel or there's an epilogue, or if this is like 10,000 years after the last Mistborn book.
Admittedly, all of the books that have been in the Cosmere have hinted that like spacefaring is relatively new.
Yeah. That it's going to be happening. I'm sure eventually someone will be able to put together a timeline and everything. But at the moment, it's still a little bit murky because he's not doing everything in chronological order and trying to figure out, like, what age are the Mistborn people at compared to the people on the Stormlight Archive planet.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to say Alenthi, but that's like the country.
Yeah.
Roshar is the planet that Stormlight Archive takes place. Yeah, and I guess if you're completely new to Brandon Sanderson books and you don't really understand...
We're speaking Greek to you right now.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, the interesting thing is that he's known for being like a fantasy author. Most of his stories take place with like knights and swords and warfare and everything.
Magic, which typically doesn't... I mean, unless you're Star Wars, it doesn't typically go well with space travel.
Yeah, I mean, they always kind of hint that maybe some of their magic is related to like ancient... fantastical sci-fi stuff, or that like the magic has a more logical leaning to it.
Yeah.
But this is really the first hinting that what started out as a series of individual fantasy novels is building towards this almost Avengers, but for an entire universe, where every fantasy world is a different planet in the same galaxy. And when they become spacefaring, you will have different types of magic facing off against each other, but in space.
Oh, man.
Yeah, everything has to be a shared universe. But again, this is one of those things where Brandon Sanderson has been setting this up since, I think, like the early 90s.
Yeah, he's definitely been putting in the legwork, at least
for
this.
I think I remember in a previous episode where we had done, like, Mistborn or whatever, they kind of mentioned, like, oh, there's an astronomer who looks through a telescope and they can see a planet that has like 2 moons, a red one and a green one. And then you go to Roshar and they've got 2 moons, a red one and a green one. Mm-hmm. So there was always kind of these hints that like, oh, these things were interconnected. But this is the first time that you're really having like a story where it's clearly set in the universe as it's interconnected, and just where that fits in the timeline, if it's after all the stories have been told, or in the middle, and part 2 of Stormlight is going to be there, who knows. But either way, long tangent aside, the point is, this book is a lot better if you know stuff about Sanderson and you know stuff about his Cosmere universe, if you've read other stuff before. If you haven't, it's not indecipherable, but you're not going to have as good or as easy as a time as you are with any of the other stories.
It's like watching the second Rocky movie. You're going to get the understanding of what's happening. They'll tell it to you, but it would be better if you at least watched the first one.
But yeah, all that aside, if you have read some stuff, it's a pretty good book. You know, it gets the job done. It's nice. It's the fastest of the books. If you've been watching all our other Sanderson things, we kind of complained that a lot of them were slower to start or that the openings were really long and kind of tedious. This does not do that. This gets you straight into the action, and it just doesn't really stop. It's just all gas.
Yeah. It's pretty much, I wouldn't put so far as the gas, but it is definitely, it gets to 60 and it just keeps going.
Yeah.
We're not blasting 150 here, but we are definitely going at the same speed the entire time.
Yeah, I think the action movie comparison is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And, this isn't like Crank where, like, you literally can't stop moving. Like, this does have some downtimes. This does have some conversations and stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's always this sense of pressure of moving forward. I think the whole thing takes place over the course of, like, 2 days.
Yep.
Yeah, and they pretty much, like, don't sleep or barely sleep in those 2 days. It is just fast and furious.
And he actually does say in his post notes on this one that he did base it off of just this kind of man blows into town scenario, which, as I don't know if I've discussed, I freaking love that idea.
Sort of wandering samurai,
gunslinger, you name it. Just man blows into town. Things change because man blows into town.
He really did just start with, like, a stranger comes into a situation that already is in the midst of its climax and just tries his best to make sure things don't go even worse than they already are.
Mm-hmm. And since it's a Sanderson book, he does it pretty awesomely.
Yeah, he does a really good job of that. Like, if you want an action story, if you want something like that, like, 10 out of 10.
And actually,
maybe 9 out of 10, but close up there.
This is actually the most, like, chunky book that he's ever put out. I mean, chunky in the sense of, like, Sanderson loves a hard magic system. And this is, I think, the first time we've actually gotten, or at least you and I, have seen him talk about his magic system this way.
Yeah. Where he's specifically talking about, like, investiture, I think it's called. We're basically in the Brandon Sanderson collective universe. All magic is powered by the same source, but depending on, like, your society and your culture and how your mind works, you funnel that in different ways.
Yeah.
But it all comes from the same, like, cosmic energy that kind of flows through all beings, and some beings have more investiture and some have less. But this being super in the future from a character who has traveled the universe and knows a whole lot about investiture, they're talking about it like, oh, he's got like 500,000 BPUs. That's enough to power this.
Yeah.
He's incremented magic into metric units that can be calculated and used to do different tasks and stuff like that.
And so, this is the first time you actually get this feeling of, like, taking the mysticism away from magic and making it into a very, like, I don't know, energy-based system, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's a part in here where he's trying to figure out how the local magic works, and he's like, when you do this, do you say any magical words? He's like, yes, we must praise the gods. It's like, okay, gotcha. Well, see, you can funnel the investiture through the words that you say that are tied into your soul. So by saying those same words and believing it in the same way that you can, I can funnel my investiture that works locally under your magnetic poles this way.
He does physically just, like, tell one of the NPCs to skip his dialogue in the middle of. He's just like, but we must praise God. Yeah, I get it. All right, now I understand.
What's the key point? Can I change a few words? And still he's, like, experimenting with, like, how they're, they thought it was this mystical thing, and he's very much taking a scientific approach to it.
Yeah, and so that's that being said on that, I really enjoyed this book. It was, like, I don't want to go as far as to say gas, but it was definitely, it was a enjoyable ride up from beginning to end.
Yeah, for me, I'd say gas. Like, I read this in, I think, like 4 days. It was just really fast. Once I started, I just got like 10 chapters a night and finished it up.
I had the added bonus of being able to listen to this during my jury duty, that I was there for at least 10 hours, and this is an 11-hour book, so I didn't have anywhere to go.
You weren't sitting on a jury secretly listening to this.
No.
It was you were waiting in line to be interviewed for jury duty.
Yes, but that's jury duty. That's going in for jury. Yeah. Spoiler alert for the American government system. When you're at jury duty, you're picked. Then you're on a jury duty.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that people didn't like, some murder case was going on, whatever. I was listening to the Sunlit Man the whole time. I just always pick guilty, 50-50 chance. He's either guilty or he's not. But yeah, overall, a very enjoyable story. The one thing I will say, though, to its detriment, is that even though I enjoyed every moment of reading it, even though I got through it very quickly, it was very fun, It didn't really stick with me.
No.
Like, afterwards, we're kind of struggling of things to talk about, things to say, because it's not a very deep book. It doesn't have a whole lot to say. Like, there are character arcs and stuff, but, like, the villain is transparently just, like, an evil dude. The planet is kind of a cool mystery, but they figure it out by the end of it, and they do pretty much everything you can do with the planet, so I'm not interested in, like, seeing any more.
Though I will say, how much really could you get in 2 days worth of character development?
Yeah.
This is, like we said, gas. It's you're not really going to get somebody being like, I'm changing my entire life after 2 days.
Yeah.
That he does do the whole, like, blows into town thing where he shakes up everything, but these characters are still themselves at the end of the day.
I mean, the main character does have a pretty good arc and everything. The problem is a lot of that almost feels like it was built off of Stormlight Archive stuff.
Yeah.
And this is almost like an epilogue to that, where you'd have to have read all that and then maybe this would be a satisfying conclusion. But here it's just sort of like going into an action movie and, you know, maybe the guy has like his buddy who's the comic relief and there's a noble sacrifice or whatever. And you're like, oh, that was sad in the moment. But at the end of the day, you had no context for that guy or what their life was beforehand. It's just like, oh, well, that was... What? Okay, cool. Yeah.
This is an OVA, basically.
Yeah. It's a nice little It's weird to call it a self-contained story because we spent the whole first half being like, this is deeply tied into everything else. But at the end of the day, as far as its plot and themes and all the interesting stuff going on, it was just a nice little sci-fi story, and it was a nice little action thing, and it didn't really have a whole lot else to do. There's not a whole lot of meat to dig into.
Yeah, and I think we've reached the end of our spoiler-free, and I think you said we're just going to summarize the entire damn thing?
Yeah, we're going to go ahead. You know, if you've been watching the show for a while, you know, every episode up until the previous one, really, we tried not to do summaries, because I always felt kind of cheap. Where, like, I'm going to read a book and then just tell you what it's like. Because I feel like the experience of hearing someone describe a book is not the same as doing it. And you really should go read it yourself.
Yep.
We've previously just been like, I'm not going to explain it to you. We're just going to talk like you've already read it and assume you have. But in the last episode, MBT really made a good point of, like, you know, maybe if you can convince people through the summary that it's interesting, maybe they'll go read it. And in this case especially... We don't have a whole lot else to do, so we might as well just do a little play-by-play, go over everything that happened here.
Let's do the elevator pitch.
So the story starts out with a guy named Nomad, which is clearly not his real name, but, you know, it's a description of what he is. He's a roaming person, and he seems to have the ability to teleport between planets, because he teleports to this planet and is instantly just caught up in a bunch of shit. He doesn't speak the language, he's running low on energy, you get the idea that he's on the run from someone. Which, actually, they do explicitly say, what are they called? The Night Brigade?
Night Brigade. Also, cue Terminator music as he stands up.
Just coming out of the teleporter. He's just
what planet is this?
I'm here. Now. And yeah, he's just, I'm on the run from the Night Brigade. And that, I gotta say, great name. Yep. You don't have to know anything about the Night Brigade. If he says... I had to teleport away from a planet because the Night Brigade is after me. It's just like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah, those guys sound like they're bad news.
You know, I don't know who the Night Brigade is. Who knows? Maybe you deserve to have the Night Brigade on you, but I would run.
Yeah, maybe you deserve, but I don't want to be around you with this happening. So you do what you're going to do.
Yeah, so he instantly finds himself on this planet. And like all the Brandon Sanderson planets, it's a planet of gimmicks.
Yes.
And this one's gimmick is that the sun will fucking kill you.
Oh, so very bad. Like, it's, yeah.
He basically arrives to find himself in the middle of an execution where they are in dusk. You could see the sun's, like, starting to rise, and they are just chaining people to the ground. Because as the sunlight comes up, it is just, like, turning the entire surface that it touches into a liquid with how blazingly hot it is. And he manages to escape getting executed and gets on one of their, like, hover bike things. Because despite the fact that this is a planet where the sun kills you, they somehow have the technology for hover bikes.
You find out about it later, but...
Yeah, I mean, it was colonized by some people,
and they know,
space aliens.
They know they're colonized. This isn't some big shock to them. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, they realize that their ancestors came here. They don't know exactly what's up because it's been a while, but...
They're kind of those people that are like, we settled in a swamp, but it's a swamp. But it's home.
Yeah.
But it's a swamp.
It's one of those things that they kind of mention, which I guess is a little interesting, because not only does the sunlight destroy you, but this planet is pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
They say that, like...
Comically small.
Yeah. They're like, you could drive around the entire surface in, I think, 12 hours or something like that. Like, granted, they've got ships that go, like, 90 miles an hour or whatever.
It's the Rhode Island of planets.
Yeah. It's just this tiny little planet, and the sun kills you on the one half. And they're like, because it's so small and it rotates so fast, it's like, the sun's only there for like an hour. Everything's hot and magma. Mm-hmm. And then all the plants have basically evolved to like, as soon as everything cools down, the plants grow in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
They're talking about like, if you follow after the firestorm that is the sunlight.
That's how bad it is. That it's like, there's the sunlight, and then afterwards there's a maelstrom of fire.
Yeah, because the pressure differences and the heat and the cold side of the planets just make basically the sunlight is always followed by a fire tornado.
Which is one of the most metal things I think I've heard in a while.
Yeah, and then from the fire tornado, like the plants grow up. They're like, if you get there like 20 minutes later, it's like a verdant forest. Mm-hmm. It's huge. There are somehow animals that live in that part of the planet.
Don't know how. Never really explained.
Yep, and then all the plants and everything, they just shoot up seeds like way up into the sky. They crumble right before the sun comes. Mm-hmm. And then the sun just basically remakes everything. And they talk about like, they have some maps that they use the stars, but there's literally no landmarks.
Yeah.
Because the entire surface of the planet gets obliterated every day.
The thing that frightened me the most about it was like, there are mountains because things be built up, but those mountains still liquefy.
Yeah.
And that is horrifying.
You cannot get on top of the mountains, you will die.
Yeah. And you can be in the shade of the mountains, but you want to not be in the shade because that means that there is something between you and the darkness.
Yeah.
And that is called fire.
You want to watch out for that. So yeah, they're on this planet, and basically the people, they live on the run. They live on floating cities where, they have these hover bikes, and basically the hover bikes connect to these buildings that are also hovering. Mm-hmm. And they basically like form a big collective chunk city.
Yep.
A big floating city, and they're just always on the run from the sun.
Now, you'd be asking yourself, how do these things get powered, and how do they stay powered?
Yeah. So everyone on the planet is highly invested. They're highly magical.
Actually, they themselves are not.
They are, because they can give heat to each other and stuff like that. That's what they call it, but he's really like, oh, you're transferring investiture from one person to another.
From what I'd heard, it wasn't highly, but they're just normally invested.
Yeah. Well, they're highly invested. They don't know how to use it for very much. Like, they can transfer the magic between each other to, like, make it so they don't have to rest, or they can heal from wounds a little faster. Mm-hmm. But most of that is just, like, it's what allows them to keep running and survive on, like, sleep for, like, 3 hours in between running from the sun. And hunting and everything. And then what happens is the people who get left out in the sun, they get obliterated, but their souls, all their investiture, gets basically collected into these little glowing rocks that I think they call sun hearts?
They call sun hearts.
Yeah. And the sun hearts are power sources. So in addition to having a society that's always on the move, the elderly are constantly being sacrificed.
Or the sick.
Or the sick.
Or the lame.
Or the lame, the enfeeble. They're constantly being sacrificed to the sun in order to make new sun hearts that they can use to power everything else.
It's Mayan eugenics.
I wouldn't really call it eugenics, because most people volunteer.
Yeah.
They don't force you, or at least they didn't, except there's a big bad guy,
Douchebag,
the Cinder King.
Yep.
Which, I mean, his name is the Cinder King. Of course he's bad.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he? And he's the one who chained everyone down. He's the one who's like, well, what if instead of just using the ones we need from the old people, we just chain down like 100 people every day, and if you step out of line, you get to be one of those 100 people.
And you mind your spoiler, but you do find a room where he has like hundreds of them just lining the walls. That's horrifying. Those were all people.
Yeah. They're all people at one point.
And then he does something even more heinous, which is one of the things that you see at the very beginning is a person with an open rib cage and a red spark at the center.
Yeah, essentially like a sun heart just like fused into their chest. that lets them access all the investiture, so they're like super fast, super powerful, very durable, but they're also basically slaves to the Cinder King. They're like mindless automatons that do whatever he say.
And you find out a little bit later, but basically he takes a corrupted sun heart and shoves it into a person's chest, and it burns away their physical soul.
Yeah.
It's some messed up crap.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing where basically after escaping, Nomad ends up in the middle of a big conflict between a bunch of rebels and the Cinder King. You know, the rebels are storming the base. They're trying to get back specifically their previous rebel leader, whose name I can't remember.
Elegy.
Elegy, yeah. They're trying to get Elegy, who was captured by the Cinder King and turned into, I think they just call them cinders?
No, they call them charred.
Charred. Yes, the Charred are what they call the zombies that have, like, the sun hearts in them. And Elegy has been captured and turned into a Charred. And even though they, like, hold her captive and break her connection to the Cinder King, they pretty much make it clear that, like, oh yeah, she's never going to recover her memories. She's essentially a new person just in the body of Elegy.
Which is just sad and frightening in all parts.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where her sister's like, maybe with time she'll recover.
And every other character that has the no is just like, it's not happening.
Nomad's just like, yeah, maybe. And he's like, why are, you know, his little assistant is like, why are you telling her that that'll happen? Her soul was obliterated. There's literally nothing of the person you once knew. Maybe like the faintest hints. But yeah, even at the very end, it's like she has all she really gets is this sense that, like, maybe she had something that she lost, but she never really recovers to who she was.
Again, another kick in the groin right there. Like, hey, do you want to know that you've lost something? Do you want to know what you lost? You don't.
You don't know.
But
you
do know
aware.
that. But you do know that you lost it.
Yeah, you are aware that you were a different person once. That's the most you can hope for.
God, that's just Bummer City.
It is a bummer, although it is interesting that they give, like, several chapters from Elegy's perspective. And it's weird, even after they break her away from the Cinder King, because she's basically got no history, no past, no memories, and she's just filled with magic power giving her super strength, it basically just drives her to want to fight everything near her. She's just like, I have so much energy and I must punch!
Constantly on bath salts.
Yeah.
Constantly.
And it basically just takes Nomad a whole lot of talking to convince her, like, look, you could punch, but these people will just crumble. Like, the only one who will give you a good fight is, like, me, and I'm not going to fight you. But the Cinder King, he might give you a good fight, you know? And if you have the patience to wait until then you could have a really satisfying battle.
He's also kind of just, like, giving her the whole, like, you have to fight for the right reasons type speech, which is really good to see. And good to see from the angle of somebody who just has a blank personality.
It's weird because he tries really hard to be like, you gotta fight for the right reasons. She's like, I don't care about right and wrong. I just want to fight. He's like, well, you could have a really satisfying fight.
Yeah.
Like, I do like satisfying fights. She does eventually at the end kind of get a little hint of, like, a personality, a little hint of, like, caring about other people.
She's fully faking it at the end, though, too. She's, like, learning to... These are emotions that she's learning to use and then show. Like, oh, wow, you're a toddler.
Yeah. It's like, people like it when I smile. I should smile. Like, really eerie, creepy smile.
Yeah, it was like, we're trying to say happy birthday. We're not saying we're going to kill you, Batman.
Yeah, and it's the thing, she finds out how to disconnect the other Charred from the control of the Cinder King. And she's like, well, people like that when they did it to me, so maybe they'll appreciate if I do it to other people. And they're like, we do, except for all of them become, like, mad berserkers who just start attacking everyone and everything around them.
Yeah.
They're like, I appreciate that you're helping, but you're kind of not helping.
So, yes, I think we've gotten off track a little bit on this.
Yeah. Again, we're in doing the synopsis, we're also having the discussion about the interesting things that are happening as we go. But yeah, long story short, Nomad gets involved with this. He gets involved with the rebels. And then he decides to help the rebels. And that's pretty much just the entire story, is they're, like, on the run from the Cinder King. There's specifically, they have a... what would it be called? Like a relic? It's like a key to...
Yeah.
They think it's a key to, like, some hidden city, and Nomad recognizes it as like, oh, that's these aliens. They're known for being like scientists, and they observe, and they might have like an observation facility underground that can survive the sunlight. But that's going to be something that holds like 20 people most.
Not the 150 people you have.
They seem to think that there's like a hidden thing that they can go into and like, we'll escape underground and forge a new life there. And he's like, you won't. And they're like, well, we're going to die anyway, so we're at least going to try and find out what's underneath there.
That's actually quite satisfying about this story, was that the entire time, Nomad is not saying, oh, there's hope, there's hope. He's constantly like, this is a fool's errand.
Yeah.
This is a fool's errand.
Yeah.
Which is really nice.
Yeah, this could get bogged down with a lot of like arguing back and forth. But he's like, this is not going to help you. And they're like, do you know for certain? He's like, well, I guess I don't. There's always a chance, but it's, incredibly tiny. And they're like, well, we're out of soul hearts. We can't make any more. The Cinder King's got way more forces than us. If we stop to collect the hearts, he's just going to kill us. If this has a 0.1% chance of working, I'd rather go down fighting than just like sitting here and waiting to die.
And they latch onto that, and they don't. Yeah. Again, the thing that I really like is that they just don't turn around and when it goes bad and blame the hero.
Yeah. Well, especially because he helped them do a whole lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, that hasn't stopped stories before, or like,
yeah,
I've done a lot of good for you, but you lied the one time, and I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay. And
yeah,
now
they're pretty
all
much,
that goodwill's gone.
They know from the start, like, yeah, we're pretty much screwed either way, but we could be screwed and at least stick it to the Cinder King a little bit.
We can at least be screwed and try, or we can be screwed and sit and be sad.
Yeah.
We're going to try.
That's the thing about this, right, is that in describing the plot, the most interesting stuff is the setup, the science fiction concept. Here's what a soul heart is. Here's what a cinder is. Isn't it neat to get the perspective of someone whose soul was erased, trying to figure out who they were? And then most of the plot is just like, well, there's like an action chase scene, and then he has to fly over the big mountain, and then they like build guns, and then they go into the underground base, but it's exactly what he says, and then there's like a fight with the Cinder King. And really, it's just a bunch of, like, action set pieces. And the resolution is essentially, well, what if we just killed the Cinder King?
Yep.
And they do.
And then the story pretty much abruptly ends right after that happens.
Yeah.
It's boom, boom, boom.
He escapes outwards. And I guess the only other thing really worth mentioning is that Nomad is not alone in this. He is not completely a wanderer. Although I guess most wanderers usually have some kind of like comic sidekick or something.
Well, not everyone, but this one did specifically.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he's necessarily funny, but he's goofy.
Yeah, he has charm.
He's a charming, yeah. So he has a little, what you would know if you had read Stormlight Archive as a spren. Basically like a being of pure investiture that lives in his head and can talk with him. And also is the soul of the weapon he uses, which it can change shape. Yep. And I think it's a shard blade, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a shard blade, and he can have it change shape into other things, a crowbar and stuff. And I guess it is also worth mentioning, because if you've read Stormlight, you know that you're like, isn't a shard blade something that, like, if the blade touches you, you die? How is the Cinder King fighting him at all? Well, Nomad is cursed with a torment that prevents him from using physical violence. And that torment is there for 90% of the book. It gets removed at the very end.
I'd say 85, but yeah.
I'm honestly a little bit disappointed that he found a way around it. Because I kind of like the idea that he's like, yes, I am super strong and super powerful, but if I try to punch someone, my body freezes up.
Yeah.
If I try to make a sword, my body freezes up. He manages to get some things where he's like, what if I just make a crowbar? That's just a tool, and I'm not using it to attack this person. I'm using it to, like, crowbar open this door, which will release a bunch of pressure and send them flying out, but, that's not direct violence. It's the wind doing the violence.
It's basically, I shot the rocks above you, they're falling down, that hurts you, but it doesn't hurt me. Yeah. I didn't hurt you, I hurt the rocks.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is pretty neat. First off, that is very difficult to make an entire story off of. But second off, he does tie how he does that really well into solving the Cinderheart problem.
And so what I was going to say, though, is we were talking about Ox, which I guess we should name him. That's the little spren he has, his little companion. And this is one of those things where I'm not sure if this has happened in Stormlight or if it's one of those things that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But they mentioned that, like, yeah, at some point, Nomad had the power of, like, a shard, like a godlike being inside of him that gave him near limitless power. And he did something that caused Ox to lose pretty much everything that he is. He's just like a shell of his former self.
Burned away his soul.
That's why he changed his name to Nomad and went on the run. And that's also why he's on the run, because even though he no longer has the godlike power, he gave up the shard, I think it's called.
Yes.
Yeah, which is like a shard of the original god that created the universe and then died. And then he gave it up, but the Night Brigade knows that he touched it, and apparently they have some way to, like, track it to where it is now by looking at him. Mm-hmm. And so they will hunt him to the ends of the galaxy because the shard is so immensely powerful.
Yes.
And so that's why he's on the run, and that's also why Ox is kind of messed up. And there's a couple moments throughout the story where Ox is like, you're about to die. I could exert some of my power in order to do it. And Nomad's like, no, you're not allowed. If you use any more of your power, you're, like, literally dead. Like, there's nothing left of you. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not just dead, but, like, you are a soul. So if you use yourself, you get wiped from existence.
Yep.
Forever. And I will not do that.
And it's him defending the last memories of a friend. Yeah. And it's very touching.
Yeah, the friend that's there to remind him, sort of like, almost like his conscience in some ways. To be like, because he's like, I'm on the run. I don't have time to think. I don't have time to get caught up in these things. And Ox is the one who's always like, oh, really now?
It's literally the last of who he used to be talking in his ear.
Yeah. And there is one moment, the one kind of, like, touching moment near the end, which I guess we can spoil because this is one of the few heartfelt moments, is where Ox is like, you're going to die unless I give you this power, and with that power you'll be able to fly. You can outrun the sun. Yeah. And he's like, no, I'm not worth saving. I gave up my oaths. I'm a betrayer. I don't believe in that anymore. And Ox is like, you may have given up your oaths, but I never gave up mine. Like, you may not believe in this, but I believe in that. And if you don't, I'm going to force you to. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the bittersweet thing, is that he ends up saving all the people and doing the right thing and defeating the Cinder King. Although it's the people that really defeat the Cinder King. He just distracts him long enough. Yep. Well, he basically convinces the Cinder King to fight him on the ground, gets him off of the city, and then Elegy and her sister get into the city, and they talk to all the, like, scared people who are running everything, and they're like, he's on the ground, let's just fly away! Like, you live in fear, I live in fear. They're like, we can't, he'll punish us. Like, not if he's dead, just go!
Let's get out of here.
I love that, like, now that I think about it, the solution to this is, let's just ditch him. Yeah.
Dude, just let him go, bro. Yeah,
they ditch him, and then right before the sun comes, Nomad teleports away. He finally gets enough investiture saved up.
He literally rips the heart out of the guy and steals every bit of energy he has, and then just
teleports away to another planet somewhere safer.
Farts off somewhere, yeah.
And, he's left with, I saved those people. I did the heroic thing. I did my vows. Like, isn't that great, Ox? Silence.
Yeah. Not to mention the fact that his weapon still does the whole transforming thing, but it is now just the corpse of his friend. Yeah. You get to wield the corpse of your friend as a weapon.
It no longer talks to you, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a little, again, I was saying before, I'm not going to say this doesn't have, like, pathos, it doesn't have emotional moments. It does. Nomad definitely has an arc. Ox has, like, an arc in it.
Elegy has an arc.
Cool, it's just that, like, other than saying, well, that was a kind of a cool thing. He learned to be a hero. I mean, that's a story as old as time. Yep. It's very simple.
He has to relearn how to be a hero in a story. Yeah. When he's already been a hero in other stories.
Yeah. Well, again, it's the wandering traveler, a jaded guy who used to be a hero and then figured out, I'm no hero anymore. And he has to learn to be a hero again. This is Cars.
No. No.
This is Brandon Sanderson's Cars.
No.
I'm sure there are other movies I could compare it to, but...
God, why?
I always loved that whenever you got, like, the classic hero's journey. Like Cars.
Man. You can't see it, group that's listening to this, but it is making me physically cringe when he says this. Yeah, I think that's as much we can drain out of this story, though. Yeah.
Like I said, it's weird to be like, yeah, there's not a whole lot we could say about it other than, wasn't that moment cool?
Yeah.
Was that thing cool? We've said it before, when a story is good, sometimes there's not a lot to talk about. You can get a ton from something that does something really bad, and you can get a ton from, like, the top tier, the most important stories ever written.
I mean, like, I'd say the greatest litmus test of this is, like, John Wick. You're not looking at John Wick and being like, the pathos of this. You're just like, dude, did you see him kill a guy with a pencil? That was dope.
That was crazy. Did you see his dog died? Isn't that sad?
It's so sad, but then he kills everyone.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, or again, I think from the very beginning of this, I compared it to Die Hard, where it's like, yeah, I'll sit down and watch Die Hard. Yeah. Die Hard's a good movie. But if you try to sit down and, like, analyze it, it's like, what are you going to talk? Wasn't it cool when he ran across the glass?
Don't you know that is symbolizing man's struggle against technology?
He was like, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, and then he shot that guy.
Oh, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, is actually just an allegory.
The weird thing about it, at least to me, is that I'm very much someone who, even if something doesn't have a lot of subtext, I like to go for that subtext. You know, I'm the person who watches Jaws and be like, you see, well, this is the Marxian analysis of this. The fact that, like, the mayor, right? He works for big business. He cares about the economy. He's literally sacrificing the people to the sharks, and it's up to a representative of them to fight against it.
Now, people on the other side, you're not seeing me, but I am currently taking a chisel to the inside of my ear. It's about a big shark.
Yeah. But I still think it's fun to analyze things that way. That's, it's not that I think the person writing Jaws had that in mind or that it's the best example. I just think it's a funny thing to do. But I can't really think of anything with this. It's just like almost so basic or so simple.
It's tyranny versus freedom. And spoiler alert, we've seen this 1,000 times plus one.
Yeah, and this has got some cool like visuals. It's got some cool new things I haven't seen before. Like, I haven't seen someone pilot a city over a mountain. That was an interesting new experience.
But yeah, like you're not gonna get a life-changing experience. You might. Actually,
someone might really connect.
Much like
again, maybe if you know more about Stormlight Archive and you know this character, maybe there's more to it. But I really found it's been like a week since we read, and I'm like struggling to think of like what happened then. There was some stuff that happened after that.
Admittedly, I've devoured 3 other stories by now.
But again, with all that being said, thoroughly enjoyed our time with it. It was a fun read. Would recommend.
And it's actually kind of small comparatively, it looks like.
No, it's bigger than most of the other ones. It's just a really fast and breezy read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
as for the future of the channel, still kind of up in the air. This was a big project that we'd hope maybe like with how popular the Kickstarter was, that this would revitalize things. And it really hasn't.
Nope. No. So we got to figure out another track that we're going to start running down.
Yeah, we may come back with this. I don't think it's going to be a monthly thing like before. I do have another idea for a show, but I'm not sure if that'll come together. I have my tabletop RPG I'm working with, and that may end up here because that's like collaborative storytelling. That's like a literature of a sorts.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah.
So,
and if you come up with your audio drama or whatever that you're working on, maybe we could post that up here.
Yeah,
it's not a huge audience, but 2,000 people get you a head start.
Hey, that's better than what we started with Hardleg Gaming.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, I appreciate everyone who came along for us with the ride, everyone who continues to listen to this show. I know it's not the most popular or exciting thing that I put out, but I have a lot of fun making it, a lot of fun hanging out with Brandon. And even though the future's kind of uncertain, I'm sure there'll be something else on this channel.
Yep.
And hopefully you look forward to that too.
Yeah, hopefully next time it's going to be a fun update, and we'll see you again next time.
Yeah, until then, keep reading.
Yep.